Revelation 3677. From the 5th of February 1946. Course of a redemption period. All spiritual beings which are still apostate to me at the end of this redemption period must once again cover the course of development on the new earth in bound will, just as they had reached the last stage of free will on the old earth, where they could decide for or against me. But the spiritual, whose course of development is interrupted by the complete destruction of the earth's surface, continues it in new creations and thus soon reaches the last stage of its development. I impose serving duties on it again, which it must first fulfill in bound, but then in free will, in order to redeem itself from form. Consequently, the newly formed earth is once again a school of the spirit from which the spiritual, which once apostatized from me, can emerge in highest maturity, if only it is willing to do so. In the beginning the upward development can proceed more quickly because the people of this earth are in love and every activity is conducive to the spirituals becoming free. For the power which wants to prevent this is bound for a long time. The spiritual, which now embodies itself as a human being, is likewise willing to serve in love, for the frequent violent destruction of its outer form and the resulting frequent interruption of its development has caused it agony, which now determines the spiritual to escape from every form in as short a time as possible. It strives for its original state of its own accord, it strives towards me, for the creation of the new earth constantly directs the spiritual embodied as a human being mentally towards me, because it is still given knowledge of the old earth, of the time of the low before and its consequences. It is certainly easier for this spiritual to reach the height, but it had to endure far more torments before and is therefore already more purified at the beginning of its embodiment as a human being. And thus the first generations of the new earth will also reach their goal on earth. Transformation into beings of light which can unite with me for eternity. And this will be easy or as long as people themselves make my adversary's activity impossible due to their will and their bond with me through love. For he is completely powerless against them but immediately gains power when love diminishes, that is, when love for me changes and is directed towards the kingdom, which is his. When it strives towards earthly matter again which contains spiritual things apostate to me. Then my adversary also takes action again by stirring up this wrong love and trying to turn people away from me. And again I do not force the human beings will but leave him complete freedom. The spiritual's redemption necessitates resistance, it has to fight its way through. And the more apostate it is at the time of its banishment in the solid form, the harder its battle will be. And that is why the battle will become increasingly fiercer and my adversary's work increasingly more successful the further time advances, because then, the spiritual as a human being will also animate the earth, which is initially bound in hard matter in the creations of the new earth. It will take an infinitely long time again until this battle, yet it is the irrevocable course of a developmental period that all maturing of the spiritual substance will take place quickly and almost effortlessly in the beginning because love for me is the driving force of its activity on earth, but that the upward development will become increasingly slower and more laborious the more divine love dwindles and worldly love takes its place. And that in the end Satan again has such great power over the spiritual in free will that it almost exclusively becomes apostate to me and finally has to be bound again in the solid form. My love offers him all conceivable opportunities to become free from every form during a redemption period, but his will alone is decisive. And thus one redemption period now comes to an end while a new one begins. And blessed is the spiritual being which, by giving up its resistance, is already allowed to embody itself as a human being at the beginning of such a period. It will truly not be difficult for him to finally free himself, yet his will is also decisive, for he will not be forced into loving activity as a human being, but it must be his innermost motivation to serve me with love. Then the human being will redeem himself completely and remain united with me forever. Amen.